Hey, what's up? Todd Valentine here from Seattle, Washington, and today I want to talk to you about a question I always get which never ceases to piss me off. Because it's always wrong to use the word never, and it's never right to use the word always. Let me explain to you what I mean by that. Always and never are words that are absolutes. They're black and white, and the real world doesn't work that way. Within a mathematical model, maybe. Within a definition, maybe. But in the real world, things are messy. And if you are trying to put things into clean models of always and never, you are missing out on most of life. And not only that, you're setting yourself up for tremendous blunders down the road. One of the first times this was brought home to me was as a test-taking strategy in school. And what was suggested was if you're doing a multiple choice test and you don't know the answer, you have to guess. One of the easiest ways to guess accurately is to cross off any answer that contains the words always or never. And if always and never are being used correctly, this is actually a very good test-taking strategy. The reason for this is it's very hard for such things to be true because they're so confining and restrictive. So students are always asking me questions like, is it always right to take her hand? Do you always want to escalate off the open? Should you never get physical? Should you always kiss the girl before you take her home? Should you never take the girl home without kissing her? All these different sorts of things. The right answer in the real world is almost never, always or never. It depends. Learn to be comfortable with the answer, it depends. Because the world is much richer than that. Okay? As soon as you're trying to confine the world to a model, you are losing most of the richness of life. There's a great phrase from Warren Buffett. He says, I would rather be approximately right than precisely wrong. And when you're using the words always or never, you're trying to be precise. You're trying to be exact. You're trying to be perfect. And what happens is models break down. Why is it such an easy habit to fall into, asking these words always and never? Well, I think what it is people want easy answers and people want certainty. As children, we're able to defer to an authority, our parents or our teachers, and we have certainty and rules. We're given certain rules, we follow them, and they're treated as absolute. And we just assume that there's a higher authority that has thought this through ahead of us, and it's an easy shortcut for life. There's so much stimulus being thrown at us, so many choices, it's easier to look at an authority and have a shortcut. It's easier to take shortcuts, it's easier to have certainty. But what happens as we grow up is at some point we're the adults. At some point we realize like our teachers aren't really that much of an authority. Our parents aren't really that much of an authority. They're just human beings like us, and it's time to think for ourselves. And that's scary. It's scary to think there is no authority. There is no one who's always right. There's no one we can trust. We have to trust our own thought. And so a lot of people hide from that, and they want these models of always and never. I'm going to give you two phrases, though. The map is not the territory, and the menu is not the meal. So we have these models of the world, but they do break down. Right? For example, have you ever been driving somewhere, and you're following a map, you're on your way there, and then you realize that you just followed the map to a dead end? At some point, you could be stubborn. You could be like, but the map says it's here. It must be here. If you do that, you're stuck at that dead end for the rest of your life. At some point, you have to assume, I guess the map's wrong. Let me ask someone directions. I guess the map's wrong. Let me backtrack and think for myself, or let me consult a different map, right? And when it comes down to it, you have the map as your guide or the real world as your guide. And the real world is the truth. The map is just the model of the truth. So follow the map as long as it's useful to you, but as soon as your evidence in the real world, as soon as your own thought tells you the map is breaking down, it's idiotic to continue following the map. Similarly, the menu is not the meal. How often do you see something on the menu, you order something, and it doesn't look like the menu item, right? It's not the same fucking thing, right? You don't eat the menu, you eat the thing that's there. Again, the real world is your guide. These are just representations of the real world. And these models were created by you for your past experience, created by other people, and they're not exact. So having models of the world is important. Why? Well, if you don't have models of the world, you have to take in every little bit of stimulus and try and constantly be processing it, and that's just impossible to do. There's too many sights, too many sounds, too many smells, and it's very hard to think through every particular situation in all its details. So you want to have models of the world. You need to have models of the world. Without them, you would be in overload of information and indecision. So you need to have models. But the thing is, your models need to be flexible, right, and capable of changing. As soon as you get any indication that the model you're using is not jiving with the real world or not jiving with your past experience, you need to stop and consider your model, all right? Stop and be willing to adjust your model. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner, one of the smartest men maybe in the world and certainly in finance, he has this idea of how the world works. He calls it a lattice work of models, which is he has one model for finance, another model for like social interaction, another model for math, another model for like a business structure. He's looking at the world through all these models, and within all these models, they work to a point, and then outside of a certain range, they break down. The model wasn't created outside of that range, so then he'll use a different model. And by having enough different models to look at the world, he's able to approximate the way the world works, but he knows that the models are not the world, and you're always going outside of them, okay? So the point is you need to be flexible, you need to be constantly adjusting the models you're using, and the authority is not the model, but the real world. So how do we use this point? Well, the easiest way is this. Anytime you catch yourself using the words always or never, stop and think. As soon as you say, is this always true? Stop and think. Probably the answer is no. There may be a few rare cases where the answer is yes, but certainly it's a time to stop and pause because the answer is probably no. If you say, is this always true? Stop and think. The answer is probably no, right? Also, as soon as you're looking for too much certainty, as soon as you want a black and white answer in the real world, you're probably oversimplifying. And if you oversimplify where the model breaks down, you will be massively wrong. So let's look at a couple examples from pickup that are so commonly expressed they're almost truisms. The first is the idea of never buy a girl a drink. Okay, this was a very useful idea for a lot of people for a long time, but it breaks down on close examination. All right, the idea essentially here is don't supplicate, meaning don't put yourself in a position of lowered value to the girl. Don't put the girl on a pedestal. Don't think that you have to, that like you're not enough and you have to do something special to get the girl. And don't put yourself in the provider role of buying things to get the girl. These are all really good principles. And so this idea of never buy a girl a drink works within that scope, and it actually motivates guys away from a lot of bad behaviors. However, there are times where it makes a ton of sense to buy a girl a drink. Sometimes the girl does believe you're high value, and she wants to believe that you think she's special. She also wants to spend time with you to get to know you and develop comfort with you. So in that frame, buying a girl a drink could be the most efficient, easy way to spend time with her, show her she's special, and also to follow social convention and follow maybe her blueprint for going home with a guy. So in this case, buying a girl a drink is actually a very good strategy because it follows all those principles. But if you're so hard-headed that the girl's like asking you to have a drink with her and you're like, no, I will not buy you a drink, and especially if you make a big deal out of it, you make it super awkward and super confrontational with the girl, you're going to ruin it over some little minor detail. So you need to be flexible in your model. Have this idea of generally don't supplicate, but understand why the model existed rather than being dogmatically adherent to it. The next example is the phrase always engage the group. This again comes from a well-intentioned place. It's old school pickup, and the idea here is that when you get good at game, most of the time the girl you're into will like you. So the determining factor in whether it succeeds is usually the group. Is usually whether you get cock-blocked by other girls and other guys in the group. So the idea is engage everybody, make them like you, and then once you engage with your target, the girl that you want, then that's more likely to go down and actually lead somewhere. This is a good idea in theory, and in general, it's something you want to do. However, there are a lot of instances where you don't want to. For example, say that it's an enormous group, right? Do you really want to talk to 15 or 20 people before talking to your target? If you do that, there's a good chance at least one of them might not like you, and that could cock block you. Also, there's a good chance that by the time you finally get to your target, she will have already left. She'll already be out of the group, already being hit on by some other guy, and you will have lost your opportunity. So that's just silly. Also, usually in a group that big, there are only a few people that actually really matter to the girl you're into, so you don't even need to engage most of the group. Oftentimes in a group that big, you're actually better off treating it as a girl by herself, just approaching her, dealing with the group as necessary, but then peeling her off the group because a lot of times she won't even be missed by a group that big. Also, in a group with a lot of guys, sometimes if you engage the guys too much, they will overtly cockblock you. But if you just go in and be a cool guy and force them to engage you if they want to be part of it, you put yourself in a much better position. So again, this is a model that's well-intentioned. It makes a lot of sense, but you have to know where it came from and why it exists so you also know where it breaks down, okay? So whenever you have a mental model, use it, but understand it. And most importantly, understand where the borders and barriers of that model are so you know where it breaks down and you know where a really well-intentioned model actually becomes stupid. So what are the takeaways from this video? First, if you find yourself using the words always or never, stop and think. There's probably a huge opportunity for growth and a huge opportunity for expanding or improving the way you're looking at the world and the way you're interacting. Secondly, embrace a little bit of uncertainty. Understand that the world is full of gray areas and trust yourself and your judgment. Okay, rather than looking for an easy solution or a simple black and white model, allow yourself to take in more factors and really use your intellect, right? Especially early on in learning something when you are creating those models. And lastly, constantly be expanding your models, constantly be looking for new and more nuanced ways of looking at the world, because most of the opportunities for massive growth are not from easy models that other people can duplicate. They're from nuanced models where you really are using your entire intellectual power and really expanding your comfort zone and your possibilities. Embrace the gray areas, because the greatest opportunities you're going to have for truly doing something exceptional will be when you step out of the easy, obvious ones that other people are following and truly use your full range of experience and your true intellect. So never say always, and always is never right.